In the northern marches of Eldoria lived two brothers. The younger was called Elric, gifted by fate with every charm of face and fortune. The elder was Thorin, a quiet, tireless man who rose before the sun and thanked God for every breath. Heaven's ledger is never late, Thorin would say, only dark to mortal eyes. From childhood, he worked at their father's little leather shop. When the old master died, Thorin kept the awl and apron, stitching boots and saddles from dawn to dusk, then walked home in plain wool and linen, content with bread and broth. Elric sold his inheritance the week it fell to him. With the coin, he bought a seat at the long tables of the merchant princes. Soon, his ships flew crimson sails on the sapphire sea, and his name was spoken in the marble halls of Aldera as one of the richest traders under the moon. Yet the distance between their hearts was wider than any sea. Thorin never envied his brother's gold. Each night he prayed, "Keep him safe, O Lord. Let no shadow touch his door." But pride crept into Elric like ivy into cracked stone. When Thorin's patched cloak appeared at the gate of the grand villa, Elric turned away. No poor Nan crossed that threshold twice. One winter afternoon, while Thorin was cutting a belt at his bench, a stranger entered the shop. He wore a mantle of white wolfskin. His beard was frost silver, and his eyes held the pale fire of northern stars. Thorin rose. "Good father, what may I craft for you?" The stranger smiled. "I come not to buy, but to give." Thorin blinked. "You do not know me." "Every pure heart is known," the old man answered, "even when the world forgets his name. Hear me, honest youth. I bring a secret that will change your life, if you look upon it without greed." Thorin nodded slowly. The stranger lowered his voice. "In the last watch of tonight, go beyond the north gate. Among the ruins stands a single ash tree. Dig beneath its roots. There you will find a chest. Do not open it beneath the moon. Wait until sunrise and read the letter on top before you touch the gold." With that, he vanished into the swirling snow. Thorin worked the remaining hours, but the stranger's words beat inside him like a second heart. When the city bells tolled the final hour, he took a spade, wrapped his cloak against the wind, and slipped through the sleeping streets. Beyond the gate, the ruins of the old Roman wall loomed, columns broken like the teeth of giants. The ash tree stood alone, its black branches clawing at the stars. Thorin knelt, thrust the spade into the frozen earth, and dug. Steel struck wood. He cleared the soil and lifted a small iron-bound casket. By starlight, he saw the lid carved with runes older than Eldoria itself. Inside lay coins of antique gold, each stamped with the eagle of a forgotten empire. And on top, a single sheet of parchment sealed with green wax. He broke the seal. "This gold is not your destiny. It is your test. If you bear it humbly, it shall raise you. If you boast of it, it will cast you down." Thorin shut the chest, refilled the hole, and smoothed the snow so none would know. Then he walked home through the whitening dawn, the weight of the secret colder upon his shoulders than any winter wind. He did not yet understand who the stranger had been, nor what trial waited. He only knew that some gifts are given to reveal the soul, not fill the purse. A storm raged in Thorin's heart. He knew his life had reached a turning point. On one side glittered the dream of gold, enough to end every hardship. On the other lay the scrap of parchment whose words were now carved into his memory. "This treasure is not your destiny, but your test." Next morning, Thorin opened the leather shop at the usual hour. Yet his eyes drifted again and again toward the ruined Roman wall where the casket lay buried. Each time the same whisper returned, "Go, dig it up. That chest holds the answer to every hunger, every rent day, every ache in your back." Let the old vow rot with the leaves. And each time his faith answered, if it is not mine, then leave it where it lies. Greed is the second serpent in Eden. Days passed in silence. Silence grew heavier than iron. One evening, when the sky bled crimson over the river Eld, Thorin walked to the marble mansion his brother had built on the ridge. Perhaps, he thought, Elric will be the one trustworthy soul with whom to share the burden. Elric received him in the gilded antechamber reserved for senators and silk merchants. When the servants withdrew, Thorin spoke softly, telling everything. The white-bearded stranger, the ash tree beyond the north gate, the iron-bound chest, the warning parchment, and his own decision to rebury the gold. Elric listened, fingers drumming on an armrest carved into a lion's paw. Then a spark leapt into his eyes. Brother, you are a fool. Fortune handed you the key, and you locked the door. Let us go tonight, you and I. We'll raise the chest and split the coin. Half for you, half for me. No one need ever know. Thorin shook his head. If we disturb it at all, let the gold serve the poor, the orphan, the wounded veterans of the king's wars. That alone would turn the test into a blessing. Elric's laughter cracked like a whip. Charity builds no palaces, buys no stallions, fills no coffers. You have wasted your life on piety and still sleep on straw. I will not waste mine. He stood, cloak smurling. Stay pious if you must. At moon zenith, I shall claim what you were too timid to touch. Thorin tried to bar the door. Elric shoved him into the night and slammed the gate. Alone beneath the torches of the avenue, Thorin felt the sting of rejection sharper than winter air. He returned to his cottage, fell to his knees on the bare boards, and prayed until the candle drowned in its own wax. Then he slept, resigned, emptied, at peace. At the same hour, Elric rode out. A silver moon hung over the ruins. Frost crackled beneath his horse's shoes. He carried a spade, a lantern, and a heart pounding with anticipation sweeter than any lover's kiss. The earth was still loose. Within minutes, he dragged the chest free, snapped the lock with his dagger, and saw the ancient gold blaze in the lantern light. The parchment warning fluttered away unnoticed, carried off by a gust of wind across the snow. By dawn, the chest stood hidden in Elric's counting room. Within a week, new tapestries dyed with Tyrian purple hung upon his walls. He bought Arabian stallions, a second mansion in the capital, and a necklace of sapphires that flashed like captured fragments of the night sky. Citizens whispered. No one knew the source of the sudden river of gold. Only Thorin knew and held his tongue. So the brothers walked diverging paths. Thorin rose before sunrise, stitched leather, gave alms from what little remained, and trusted the promise that heaven keeps its own ledger. Elric, cloaked in perfume and arrogance, banqueted with princes, while beneath the floorboards of his treasury, the antique coins waited, carrying a kos older than any empire. The reckoning, like winter, was only delayed. One pale morning, a trumpet sounded at the city gates. A royal herald in the green and gold tabard of King Alaric IV rode beneath the portcullis, escorted by a score of steel-clad household knights. Behind them rumbled a war wagon, flying the king's banner, black dragon on snow-white field. The herald carried a decree sealed in wax as red as fresh blood. Every door along the merchant quarter received the summons. Every guildmaster, every money changer, every lord of coin was commanded to appear at noon in the Hall of Justice, for the king's exchequer had discovered that treasure long lost from the royal vaults, now circulated in Eldoria's markets. Treasure last seen the night the old palace burned, 20 years ago, when a chest of antique eagles vanished into smoke and shadow, and the king's eye, like heaven's, misses nothing. In the very heart of the city, the herald drew rein beneath the bronze statue of King Alaric the Just, and lifted a scroll of green parchment. "Hear the decree of His Majesty," he cried. "A treasure lost from the royal vaults has reappeared within our walls. The king hath cast it as a test upon one of you. If the finder hath used it for kindness, honor shall crown his head. If he hath grasped it in greed, ruin shall dog his footsteps." The words rang through every alley like the peal of a funeral bell. In the leather shop, Thorin felt the echoes strike his breast, not fear, but a solemn tremor of recognition. He alone knew where the gold now lay and who had lifted it from the frozen earth. That night, the white-bearded stranger visited his dreams once more. Staff in hand, robe shining like moonlit snow, the old man spoke. "Thorin, thy patience is witness for thee. The hoard thou didst refuse was never thy portion. The mercy thou didst choose shall bear thee where the scepters of kings cannot reach." He woke drenched in sweat, yet his heart was strangely light. At dawn he carried half his week's earnings to the chapel of St. Aldrich, placing bread and coin into the alms chest. Outside the shop he set a clay jar labeled, "Whoever is hungry, eat, and bless the name of the Most High." Then he took up awl and thread and worked as though nothing had happened. Across the city, Elric's pride swelled like sails in a storm. Persian carpets were unrolled in every hall. Yemenite slaves poured wine into goblets of Murano glass. When merchants whispered about the king's search, he laughed. "Let them look. Fortune favors the bold, not the pious fool who smells of tanning oil." Yet heaven's ledger balances silently. 3 days later, the herald returned, this time astride a royal elephant. A sealed letter, green waxed with the dragon seal, was read aloud in the grand square. "Let the man who feeds orphans, who gives alms in secret, and who held fast to patience in the hour of trial, come before the throne. The king desires to set justice upon his head." No name was spoken, but every tongue in the bazaar murmured the same. Thorin, only Thorin. Still, he did not step forward. At noon, the herald himself entered the narrow lane of tanners and leatherworkers. He found Thorin bent over a worn riding boot, needle flashing. "The king commands thy presence," he said simply. Thorin laid the boot aside, washed his hands in the stone basin, and followed. Eyes lowered, garments plain, heart steady. Word flew faster than swallows. Elric, feasting in his jasmine-scented courtyard, choked on a mouthful of peacock. "The wretch has betrayed me," he roared. "He will trade my secret for the king's favor." In a blaze of silk and fury, he summoned his bodyguards, mounted his black Arabian, and galloped toward the palace. He did not know that the gates of a royal court open only to truth. They never yield to pride. Inside the Hall of Justice, the great windows spilled colored light upon the marble floor. King Alaric, silver-haired and eagle-eyed, sat beneath the sword of his ancestors. Thorin knelt. "Rise, young man," the king said, voice gentle yet grave. "Art thou he who chose patience over gold?" Thorin lifted his head. "Sire, I did only what conscience bade. The treasure was not mine, so I touched it not." A hush fell. Even the banners ceased their rustling. Then the king smiled, the slow smile of one who has found the pearl he sought. "Such integrity is the crown of any realm. By this sign I appoint thee Cadi of Eldoria, judge over mine own city. Deal justice to high and low, as thou hast dealt it to thine own soul." Gasps rippled through the hall. Before Thorin could speak, the royal steward fastened a green silk sash across his shoulder and placed in his hand a staff of white rowan tipped with silver. Outside the gates, Elric arrived too late. The guards, hearing the proclamation, barred his way. In the distance, he saw his brother, ragged cloak replaced by the judge's sash, standing straight as a linden tree beneath the king's shield. And in that moment, Elric felt felt the first cold breath of the curse he had carried home from the frozen ash tree. The man who once stitched leather for a living now stood before the marble dais to be sworn in as Chief Judge of Eldoria. At the very moment the royal seal touched the rowan wood staff, the great doors of the Hall of Justice crashed open. Elric strode in, silk cloak flapping like a torn banner, face flushed with wine and rage. "This is fraud!" he cried, voice cracking. "I found the treasure. I spent the gold. Therefore, the office should be mine." A hush swept the hall. Even the banners seemed to stop breathing. King Alaric lifted one silver brow. "Then answer me, merchant. When the gold came into your hands, did you also take the trust that traveled with it? You were given wealth, yet also given a test. Tell us, what did you build with it? From where I sit, your robes answer for you." He signaled to the captain of the guard. "Return him to the ruin whence he stole the coin. Let the ash tree teach him that treasure is trial, not triumph." Elric was dragged away, protests echoing down the corridor until iron doors slammed shut. Thorin's heart winced at the sound. Eyes closed, he whispered, "O Lord, guide my brother and lend me patience." That same hour, the new judge issued his first decree. No soul within the city walls shall sleep hungry. No widow shall pay coin to plead her cause. Justice will walk to her door. Soup kettles appeared in every square. Clerks carried scrolls of pardon to debtors' cells. Orphans were gathered into the old guild hall turned dormitory, where tutors taught them letters, arithmetic, and the proverb, "Pride digs its own pit. Humility plants gardens that outlive kings." Weeks passed. Behind the broken stones of the Roman ruin, Elric paced the small cell, the glitter of gold replaced by the gray of prison dusk. Pride crumbled first, then self-pity, finally remorse. He wept, tears that had no audience save the wind sighing through the ash tree overhead. One dawn, the lock creaked open. Torchlight framed a familiar silhouette, Thorin, carrying bread, water, and a plain woolen cloak. Elric fell to his knees, unable to meet his brother's gaze. "Forgive me," he rasped. "I called you fool while I myself was poorer than beggars." Thorin raised him up and embraced him. "If heaven can pardon, how shall I withhold forgiveness? The road forked for both of us. The destination is still the same. Truth, mercy, patience." Together they walked to the palace. Before the throne, Thorin pleaded, "Sire, let mercy complete the lesson. Set my brother free to serve rather than to suffer." King Alaric studied the two men, one clad in the green sash of justice, the other in penitence gray, and nodded. "Freedom is granted. Honor must be earned hereafter." Elric left the court barefoot, vowing simplicity. Side by side, the brothers opened the House of the Wayfarer, a refuge that fed, taught, and healed all who came. Children, once left on church steps, learned to read from the very ledger in which Elric had once counted his ill-gotten coins. Now it recorded loaves baked, sandals mended, quarrels reconciled. Years later, when travelers asked why two men, one a judge, one a former prisoner, shared the same bench at sunset, the answer was always the same. Gold passed through their hands. Character remained. The test of treasure is not what you buy, but what you become.